Our sign-in form is coming along pretty well so far. The next thing that our sign-in form needs is a button on it that says sign in, so the user can press it after they've entered their username and password and then actually get signed into the application. If you recall from a previous application we did, we don't really get anything like a button tag in React Native. Instead, we get a touchable highlight. Now, the last time that we used a touchable highlight, there was a lot of extra code that ended up inside of our component, and the render method in there actually ended up getting really messy with all that touchable highlight code. So buttons really just take a lot of code in React Native to set up, and heck, even the name touchable highlight is really a mouthful. So to keep this sign-in component nice and clean, we're going to make sure that we make an app with a lot of reusable code. We're going to define a separate button component and then import it into the sign-in file and make use of it that way. So the purpose of this new button component is it's really just going to show a single button. In other words, a touchable highlight. So I'm going to create a new folder inside of components called common, and then inside of there we'll create a file called button.js. So before we write any code in here, let's think about exactly what the button needs to do. So obviously we need to be able to press it. So we need to be able to pass a function to this component that will be called whenever the user taps it. We also need to have some custom text. We're not making a button here that's just going to be used for the sign-in component. We're going to be making one that can be used anywhere across the entire app. So we need to be able to specify the text that it displays on the fly. So with this in mind, let's go ahead and do the boilerplate. We'll import React Native. We'll grab a text, a style sheet, and our touchable highlight off of React. We'll do our module exports, create our class, and then we'll render a function that returns a touchable highlight. And then inside of there, we'll place a text tag, and that will be the actual text for the button. And I appear to have misspelled touchable highlight up here at the top. Let's fix that real quick. Touchable highlight. There we go. Okay, let's also do our style sheet at the bottom. We'll create a new style sheet, and we're going to have two styles on here. One will be for the touchable highlight itself, the actual kind of button looking thing, and then one will be for the text as well. So let's do the button first, and the button is going to have some centered text. So we'll set center on justify content and align items. Then we'll add a border to the button as well. So we'll do a border width of 1, a border radius of 5 to give it kind of a nice curve on the corners. We'll give a padding of 5. We'll make sure that the border shows up as black. And then we'll also add a margin top on there as well. The margin top is to make sure that components that get stacked up one on top of each other aren't directly touching each other. We want just a little bit of play in there, and we're probably going to want that for every button we make, so we'll just add the margin top on here directly. Next, we'll do the button text. And the button text is going to be really straightforward. We just want it to fill up the entire inside of the button. So we'll do a flex 1. We'll have it align itself to the center, and we will really dial up the font size with a font size of 20. Okay, so let's go ahead and set the styles on our tags. The touchable highlight is going to get a button style. And remember, whenever we use a touchable highlight, we also set the underlay color, where the underlay color is the color that it appears when you tap it. It's kind of that the color that makes the user say, oh, okay, like it recognized the tap that I just did. We'll then do our style on the button, which will get the button text property right there. Cool. Okay, so we got our touchable highlight and we got our text. This is looking pretty good so far. So this is one heck of a lot of code to make a button though, right? Like there's a lot of stuff going on here. The next thing we need to do is decide what properties we want to pass in, right? We need to dynamically set the text, so it will be a property that we pass into this component. And we also need to set the callback on the touchable highlight. So the callback that is called whenever the user taps the touchable highlight. So we're going to say that the text for this button will be assigned to a property called text. So we'll say this.props.text. So what this means is whenever we make use of this button component, we're saying to use this button, you need to pass a text property. And that text property will show up as the button's text. Pretty straightforward. The idea is going to be very similar for the onPress for the touchable highlight as well. We'll do onPress. So whenever the touchable highlight is pressed, call the function this.props.onPress. So what this means is that whenever we make use of the button component, we need to pass a function to the property onPress, and that function will be called whenever this touchable highlight is tapped. So it's really just kind of passing through the function here. It's really just passing through the callback. We'll see the implementation of this in the next section. So we'll, if this is a little bit unclear, we'll cover it again in the next section. So I hope that making a reusable component like this makes a little bit of sense. One of the best things about React Native is that it's generally easy to see opportunities to refactor code into reusable components like this. And as a matter of fact, I speak from experience. When I was first building this example app here, kind of doing the initial outline of how it was going to work, I actually put all of this button code directly into sign-in, and I found myself later on duplicating all of it into sign-up. And it was when I was duplicating it that I realized it was an opportunity to refactor the button out into its own separate component. So it was through, it's a lot of times whenever you're writing code and you find that you're kind of starting to duplicate things, that generally means you are in a really good situation for refactoring stuff out into a separate component that you can reuse in multiple locations. Okay, so with all that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and save this. And let's go ahead and make use of it in the next section.